Good evening. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of Farmington. It is 7:12 on Tuesday, February 18th in the city council chambers. And the first item on the agenda is a roll call. Clerk Bachman, will you please call the roll?
Mayor LaRussa.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Balk.
Here.
Councilmember Parkins.
Here.
Councilmember Schneeman.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Thank you. Full council. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I would invite everybody to please stand and face the flag if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is public comment. This is the portion of the city council meeting where members of the public who wish to address the city council may do so. We ask that you please state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Also a reminder, public comment is not a time for dialogue. This is a chance for the public to address the city council, so we'd appreciate it if you would keep your comments in that spirit. Is there anybody who wishes to address the Farmington City Council this evening? Mr. Sweeney, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, I was at Farmington Hills just moments ago. Let me try again. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, city staff. My name's Mike Sweeney, and I'm one of your emergency preparedness commissioners. Tonight's tip of the month, December's tip of the month, was courtesy of the Oakland County EmergencyManagement.com website on how to prepare our homes for the coming winter. January's tip of the month was on how to prepare your car, courtesy of the Michigan State Police mi.prevent.com website. Tonight's presentation is how to prepare your pets for the winter. And it's supposed to be courtesy of the FEMA.ready.gov/pets and/or /animals, depending on the size of your pet. But those websites are down right now so that they can be reviewed for their compliance with the executive orders of our president. That being the case, one of my things is I like paper. And from the lobby of the City Hall right here, I have 2 brochures that are from ready.com, and the first one is on preparing your pets for emergencies. According to my phone, it is 7 degrees outside with a wind chill of 1. If you truly love your pets, and who doesn't love their cats and dogs, if you truly love your pets, for crying out loud, bring them in the house. If they can be in all day, that's okay. But definitely bring them home, bring them in the house in the evening. If you're cold out there wearing a heavy coat and boots, they're cold out there just wearing their fur jackets. But as part of preparing your pets for what could be going on, we like that you would have 3 days worth of food in solid tins for if they're stored outside, cans if they're stored inside, because you do want to feed your pets, your cats and your dogs. You do not want to feed the raccoons, the possums, and the skunks. Although some people like those animals, animal control might have a problem with that. We like you to have your animals properly labeled or chipped in case they get away from you so they can get back to you. And if you need to evacuate from your home, if your pet is your pet, I love my dog. Tessa has been part of our life for 16 years. If we had to evacuate and we went up to the Red Cross tent, Cindy and I would go in there. I would not expect we would be able to bring Tessa in with us, unless your dog is a comfort dog, in which case you need to have the papers with you, in which case the dog can come with you into the Red Cross tent if you can prove it's an actual service dog, not just wearing the jacket that you got somewhere. You have to have the actual papers. And for that, it would be helpful if you had a picture of you and the dog in the same frame with the papers. Not trying to be hard-nosed about this, but if the choice is Tessa going in the tent or your grandmother going in the tent, your grandma goes every time and Tessa stays outside. That's pretty much all I have to say about preparing for your pets, unless there are questions or comments. Seeing none, thank you for your time.
Thanks for your comment. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the city council at this time? Seeing no takers, public comment is closed. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, approval of the items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Support.
Motion by Mrs. Balk, supported by Ms. Taylor. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to item 5, approval of the regular agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Support.
Motion by Mrs. Balk, supported again by Ms. Taylor. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 6, presentations and public hearings. The first one is item 6A, Events 360 and the Founders Festival. I believe we have our guests this evening. Ms. Law, the floor is yours.
This is a recap of last year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm Julie Law, owner of 360 Event Productions, and this is Jenna Smith. She is the event manager for 360. So thank you so much for having us here. Let me grab what I just handed out was a recap of last year. I would like to celebrate, not only was it the 60th year of the festival, it was also the 200th bicentennial of the city of Farmington, and we had great weather. So that alone is a celebration for all 3 days, and we were extremely happy with that. So I can let you go through this. Obviously, there's a lot of photos here, just a recap of the overall festival, media coverage that the festival received, signage throughout, all the participation, different organizations that participated, et cetera, the entertainment, beer tent, kids zone, et cetera. So everything last year in here is pretty much coming back for 2025. We are adding a few more elements to the festival, which we can talk about. But before we move into 2025, does anybody have any questions about 2024? No? Okay, great. So I'm going to have Jenna, because Jenna's been diligently working on this, just kind of do a quick overview of what the festival is going to entail. A lot of it's repeat, like I said, Fido Fest, things of that nature. And then we have a couple new elements that we're adding. And there's a few other ones we're still working on, but they're not set in stone yet, so. All right, Ellie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. So just going through, in our application, we do have a cover letter that was included, so that kind of bullet points some of the pieces of the festival. Obviously, Fido Fest is one of the fun parts that we bring back that has the ultimate air dogs. We have the Canine Star Productions variety show. There's contests throughout the day with DJs and fun elements over there, vendors, rescue groups, all of that good stuff. We have the beer tent, live music. That entertainment schedule, we're bringing back all the fan favorites. So Power Play Detroit, Sunset Boulevard, and 50 Amp Fuse. Can't be without Remy on that one. Farmington Baseball League is coming back to support the tent and be all in full force over there. We have the food court coming back with some different elements to it, so that's included in the application. I know we had some feedback on having some variety that's not necessarily part of like the downtown, so we do have like a Mediterranean halal truck coming in. There's an Indian Express that's coming back, so there's different elements that are listed in the application, including Heights Brewing, which is planning to do a barbecue tent down on site too, which is exciting. So that moves us into an element that has been requested to come back around and see force again, which is in support with the Farmington PTA president, Tiffany Moore Street, the bingo tent. So we're looking at including that into the beer tent area rather than having it be a separate entity. So finding a time slot for them to utilize a space that's already set up. That way there's tables, chairs, all that is included in what's already happening. They want to be near the action, which makes sense for them, but then also spacing and making sure that we can fit them in where it makes sense. Talent show, we're looking at combining some efforts here with our Farmington School of Rock contact Chris. He is looking to get involved in that and help out with that in different ways. So that would showcase local talent. We've got our crafters market coming back. our Kid Zone coming back. We talked with Farmington Baseball and their collaboration with the athletic department here in the city. So looking at maybe doing like a fast pitch thing that would help with fundraising for them, but then also bring some of the teens down on site to like participate and maybe run parts of that element. It also helps to encourage like recruitment and things through their association. Obviously, looking at our bounce zone, our Lego exhibit, foam party, those fan favorites coming back, things of that nature. Touch a Truck is another piece that everyone gets really excited about, and especially like the local, I want to say the kids groups that come down throughout that, so that's exciting to see again. And then we do have our parade, which we're looking at a Movie Mania theme this year. And the Grand Marshal, we are working with you guys to then accept those applications that are coming in for nominations within the city. And then I know, Mayor, you're looking at choosing and selecting that included. And then we did come up with dates, so then that way it makes sense for timelines and getting all that in. We have our team of volunteers led by Roger coming back, and our announcements read by Annette Campo. And then, of course, the 5K run with LOC and the color run. And then we did speak to the Historical Commission, Laura Myers, and they talked about maybe bringing back the Warner Mansion porch parties. She said that was something that was really exciting that was done prior to COVID. It's been a very long time since they've implemented that. We talked about different ideas of how they could get involved, but she's also concerned about her volunteers and making it worth their while so that it's something that people are excited to do. So she was thinking the porch party might be a good element to bring back to do that during the festival, and then we could locate that on maps and timelines. So she's working on that level on her end. That's why those things are listed as tentative within. And that kind of covers the bullet points of the exciting pieces of the festival. And then obviously we have all of the road barricades and the not so fun parts that are in there that come into the application each year. So any questions on those pieces? No?
Questions from the council. Ms. Taylor?
I have a couple questions I've written down. First of all, I was the delegate from the Bicentennial Committee last year, and we provided a lot of feedback. I won't go into that right now because I have it at past meetings. But it sounds like you have taken some of the feedback that we've mentioned, and as well as my colleagues have mentioned, and incorporated it into this plan. I'm very glad to see that reflected in what I see before us. Couple suggestions or questions for you. As far as the pet rescues that will be on site, are we doing anything? Is it all dogs or just cats? Because we have a new, relatively new cat cafe in Farmington Hills near 10 Mile. It's called Avocado.
They're involved.
Oh, awesome.
They are. So they're actually participants in the parade, and they were participants last year too. So they are looking to be on site, and we've had conversations with them. Super nice people. So we're trying to figure out how they'll get incorporated. There are some of the rescues that don't only focus on canine side. I mean, obviously the canine is like the big fun of the Fido Fest, right? But there are some that have cats, and they do showcase them for rescue. So we've seen those different organizations come in too.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't bring the cats on site.
Right, for obvious reasons.
Right, so you got dogs barking and, yeah, so.
Right.
But they will.
But they do bring their catalogs and stuff sometimes too, and they have printouts and things, so it's kind of fun to see what they have to offer.
I'm sure you've been in communication with the PTA?
Yes, so Tiffany, which is your PTA for the overall, I did get a few contacts for some of the like local PTAs, but she's the top person in this. So we had a nice chat today, and she's very excited. Her biggest concern is like just making sure that it's worth it for them, because she said that, you know, she kind of came back in from not doing it to then it being suggested to do the bingo again. So she wants to make sure that this year we have a good plan. We talked for a while today, and implementing it so that we're working together on it, but at the same time, she wants to make sure that it's viable for future. And if it isn't, she's like, I want to give it a good run and see if this is something we can do again and bring it back. We talked about, you know, she's like, I know this town, they love, you know, the staples and things that have come through. I said, I agree to that, but we're going to go over it and make sure that, you know, she's covered with what she needs to cover on our end and back and forth. So we had a good talk.
I appreciate that. I'm just going to add some encouragement to make sure you keep proactively being in touch with her. I think a couple things fell through the cracks last time, and received a rather scathing email, which I'm sure it was out of intense frustration on their end. They're like, it wasn't worth it to us. We were, you know, stuck in the corner. We lost a lot of money. We wasted our time, whatnot. I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I told them last year that I would be very proactive in requesting this. So just an encouragement to you. As well as signage, they didn't have much last time, and so the specific request was to get on all the signage, get on the maps, and get on the programs.
So to answer that, nobody was in touch with us on that. So we only know what we know, right? So that.
We don't need to lay blame for last year, but I'm just saying going forwards.
I understand that, but I think that we do need to understand that, like, we didn't even know they were participating. So for us not providing signage, for us not knowing where the location was, I'm not liking their location, we had no idea. We had no
We didn't
idea.
select it,
Yeah,
yeah.
we had no part in them even being on site. And I do want to make sure it's on record, like, they had not participated since it was in the park. So it's not like we just like, excluded them. They said it wasn't worth their time, as they were having the same conversation with us today. So at some point, and we didn't know they were coming back. That's really what it came down to. And it is up to them to run their nonprofit charity fundraiser. So if they don't contact us and say, we want to do this, like I said, we only know what we know. So it was a surprise to us as well, let's put it that way.
Joe?
Mrs. Bulk,
Sorry, oh, you're not.
were you done? Oh, you're okay.
Sorry, I have a
Continue.
couple more. I do have to push back on that a bit. I was part of the bicentennial committee that helped line this up, including bingo, and there was communication from our end. Perhaps not as much as it should have been, but it was, I talked to you about it.
Yeah, I mean,
So in talking to PTA president today, one of the things that she brought up to me is that she was only in communication with the library, and the library told her where to set up, and she was confused on her end. So I said, well, we had never connected, and this is the key thing here is that we didn't have your connecting piece. I had to track it down this year even to find her, which took us some time in order to be able to communicate. If that contact would have been passed on, we probably could have done a lot more with that in that case, and I think that's what Julie's
Right.
speaking to, is if we don't know who that player is that wants to participate, we're open to those conversations, and especially with developing those ideas with them, but at the same time, we have to be able to speak to them to make sure. And we weren't aware that they were hosting it there, and she said that she was kind of thrown into what she was doing too. She felt like she didn't know what was happening until she got there. So I think we're bridging that gap for that and making sure that now we've kind of closed it, and that communication will continue on. So to speak to what your concern was, I don't think we'll have that concern this year, knowing where we're standing with her.
The fact that we're sitting here talking about it in February gives me confidence that it will be going in a better direction this year. One other thing, two other questions here. Where are you thinking that the Fast Pitch will be located? I think it's a cool idea. I'm just trying to think of where it's going to be in downtown.
So they're working on what that's going to look like as far as if they're going to rent, there are some fast pitch, like inflatable things, different ideas for that. I think they're in their beginning stages of this idea, which is great. Steve is very excited about it, and I think it could be a really fun thing. I think the idea would then to be placing that within the kids zone. We do have that support from CVS, and they've given that, in written and verbal this year in advance, which is great because their manager is staying in place. So she is open to us putting what we want to put over in that area, and I think that would be a good fit for it, especially because it's kind of right in that mix of everything. But again, it's going to depend on, what type of fast pitch they're bringing in. Is it inflatable? Is it a cage? There's a lot to that. So once we get to that point, then we can kind of work that through. So they're still trying to talk to their boards and their people and tie all their volunteers together, which is the process.
It is.
Yeah.
All right. One other thing I noticed is everything new is marked tentative. I'm sure that it's because you're still working on it.
Yes.
I do want to make sure that everyone on the Farmington community side clearly knows what they need to do by when. Like, take the Historical Commission, for example. And I know you've worked with volunteer groups. This is not the first time. But sometimes planning is required that comes months in advance. And I want to make sure they know clearly what deadlines they need to hit, so there's no last-minute scramble and, heaven forbid, the porch party falls through.
We had that discussion, so again, volunteer groups, it's based on their timelines of their meetings, their community meetups, when their volunteers come together. So what we're working toward is to have some answers for that probably within the next month or so. And then that would be communicated back and forth with, obviously, our council contacts. But at this point, they're still trying to work it through with their volunteer boards, and I think some of them didn't have their meetings quite yet. So that's like where they might meet once a month or every other week, so that's what
And we do, right, and we have marketing timelines in general.
Yeah.
So the first rollout, if people don't get back to us, they won't be included in the first rollout. That doesn't mean we can't add as we go on. We're not gonna scramble last minute. I mean, we're talking in February, right? So we do have marketing timelines. We can add stuff digitally. That's not a problem. Press releases, once they go out, they go out. So that will be upon those organizations to get back to us, but they do. They'll know their timelines.
I just encourage you, especially for the city groups, like if you're working with any of the commissions, if you need them, if you need our timeline sped up, if you need to have more they need to have more meetings to get you what you need, please let our Mayor Pro Tem, your contact, know, and we will make sure that that happens on our end. If we need to speed things up a little bit, we'll do so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Ball.
I'm really glad to hear that you spoke with her today because I actually had reached out. I actually posted on my Facebook page to try and get a contact because I had not had a response on email. And so then I spoke with someone else who then I believe, but I hadn't, so I didn't know until you literally said that you spoke with her today. I was like, oh, thank goodness, because she did not return my second email.
You were doing the same chase, so. yeah,
Okay, good.
Email, messages to their website, all that good stuff to try and get that response
Yeah,
back.
so that is really good news because the last response I had from her was, that they wanted to do it, but do I need to be there on the 18th? And I literally answered her and then never heard anything else. So that gives me much more confidence. And I will state too, we have made a plan that we will be in contact every other week. So we have a plan going forward. This is a big part of it, obviously. So I'm hopeful that she was okay with that location. Was that?
Oh, yeah, very excited about it.
Okay, and I just wanted to make sure of those things, because that was my question coming in tonight, that I hadn't heard back. And so I was hopeful, so.
I think she's happy about the location and maybe a shortened time window, so then that way it's more targeted, rather than them being there all day.
Sure.
I think her biggest concern was last time is that it's just a very long day for volunteers, it's
Yep.
a long day to run it. They don't necessarily think that that long time window is beneficial.
Yeah.
And I think that with what we're kind of coming up with and narrowing down our plan, I think it'll be
Great.
a little bit more impactful for them, which is good to hear.
Excellent, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Julie, Jenna, as usual, well done. Appreciate the recap. It really doesn't hit you until you look at all of the things in one deck,
days in
and
there.
then it really, yeah, right. There's 3 days summarized in a,
2.5, but yeah.
that's a quarter of an inch. That's a B plus. I think you've heard the theme. I'm also grateful to see the feedback incorporated into the proposal. Still hearing the communication topic, and you seem to be on top of that. I would say with the number of volunteers the new volunteers that are going to be involved, I'm curious if there's and maybe this is also for Mrs. Balk, how does it work? Is it funneling all to Jana and then Jana's communicating, or are you guys communicating directly with the volunteers, or how is this going to work now?
So we'll be dealing with the volunteers directly.
Okay.
If we need help, we will reach out.
Okay,
Right? So just like when we're having a hard time finding someone, you're going to know your community better than us, right?
Yeah.
So we will definitely raise our hand and say we need help.
Okay.
But really, we just want to make sure that we're keeping everybody informed. So then that way, every 2 weeks, it's just an update, right? So then at that point, we can all decide, do we want this update to go to more people? What does that look like? That's all to be determined.
okay. How much more time would you need to convert the tentative items to they're in, they're part of the package?
I think that's probably going to be within the next month that we would have
Okay.
that answer, because some of them, like I said, they're meeting with their groups, they're trying to get their buy-in from their committees and what they work with, and once they come back to me, then we would be able to communicate that in our biweekly to Ms. Fall.
Okay. What is the on-ramp? So your plan, it's all beautiful, right? It all looks great on paper. Community group XYZ pops up and says, oh, Founders Festival's coming. Can we do something? what's the right door to send them to say, we want to host a thing alongside the Founders Festival?
info@360 Events.
Okay, so it's to you. Okay, we should not be fielding those. We should be sending
I
those
would,
directly.
I mean,
Okay.
they can come to us directly.
Okay.
If there's someone that you want to do an intro with, that's fine too.
Okay, all right,
But yes, we would definitely recommend that they just come to us direct.
okay. Because I can imagine a couple of instances, and I think one specifically, at least that I would throw on the table, is we're getting a lot of topspin off of the content that we generated for the bicentennial. So we installed a mural inside of the walk pass-through between Fresh Time and the Salon Suites. There was a lot of historical information shared that could be easily repackaged and repurposed for a festival that is to celebrate Farmington. So in addition to the current Historic Commission task, I would also say that there probably needs to be some discussion about how do we take what was good about the bicentennial and include some of that content, not necessarily branded as part of the Founders Festival, but like, oh, gathering at this, we're going to have the Historic Commission present some historical information at this mural that we installed, or we're going to do they called it a wax museum. They had the kids all dressed up and they kind of told a story about a notable Farmington person. That could be anywhere. It doesn't have to, and it's
We can include that in our program.
a transient thing, and they're there for a couple of hours and then they're out of there. But those are the kinds of ideas that I think have the potential to pop up, and I just want to make sure it's clear for those community groups and people that saw a lot of positive things come out of the bicentennial, where can we channel those?
So I think just for this conversation, let's say 8 weeks prior to the festival is like a hard deadline.
Okay.
It starts to get a little bit more complicated when groups start coming to us with ideas 4 weeks out, right? By that time, now we're really looking at, how many people are coming, are there barricades, can we squeeze them in? That's when it starts to get a little sticky. So I would say, let's say 8 weeks out for those hard deadlines, and sooner the better, but
Right.
for this conversation, if we're looking for deadlines, let's state that.
Right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So before Memorial Day, you'd like to have it buttoned up? That Friday before Memorial Day? Okay. That is very helpful for us. And I was just going to ask as a favor, Mr. Parkins, if you could go back to the Historic Commission and maybe bring that up, because I do feel like they did a lot of work, and the bicentennial did a lot of work, and it's easily repackaged and just rinse and repeat for the Founders Fest. That'd be super. Is there any other questions or discussion? Ms. Taylor?
Actually, I have another question for you. I noticed on your application that we're going to include local breweries at the beer tent this time, and something else that had been requested. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you were able to incorporate that?
We had to go to our beer distributor for it. So there was a situation years ago, there was a problem, and therefore there was bad blood between the distributor and the brewery. So we were told everybody didn't play well with each other, equipment was used that wasn't allowed to be used, so that's where that came about. So I think enough time has passed to where we're able to all sit down and have a conversation again. They do, I mean, there are rules to it, right? So they're each gonna bring about three kegs each, which they're both very happy.
Is it Heights and FBC?
Yeah, so that's where we're at. So we're making, they have to bring their own equipment, everybody knows the rules.
Yeah.
So, but we will feature them, and it should be great.
That would be awesome. That was a big request from not only our local restaurants and breweries, but also a lot of people who frequent them are like, why isn't the bicentennial beer here? I'll tell them that this time it will be. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So there's no action scheduled for this evening. I think in light of the fact that we need a month to maybe lock in some of these tentative things, my recommendation would be bring the event application back at the March 17th meeting for approval. That's 1 month from now.
That is St. Patrick's Day,
Well, and
but we're an event company.
Mrs. Paul?
so my recommendation is that I would be the representative that night.
Right.
Like you guys don't start, so I saw the look of terror. No,
That's
Ruin my fun.
sorry.
Ruin my fun.
Okay. So that night, we will just make sure that everything's been buttoned up. You and I will be in contact, but then that night on our agenda, that would be the final walkthrough, if you will, of the application, so.
So, yeah, and the tentative items should be either confirmed or no, these
Yeah.
have been, this
And
is not going to fly.
I'll report back
right?
that evening and let everybody know what's what.
And you'll have a couple of bi-weekly meetings to try it out.
All right,
Fair enough?
fair enough.
All right, if there's no further discussion, Jenna, Julie, thank you again.
Thank
It's a big task. You guys do it very well. We're very thankful that you do it, and I hope that's not lost on you in the sea of feedback that you receive, that we really appreciate it, and you guys do a fine job, so thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Safe travel.
Yes. Next on the agenda is a presentation from RASAC. Mr. Sepo, the floor is yours.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me. I always love coming to talk to this community.
We love having you.
I know in your packet is more colorful than this black and white version. I printed out for myself some metrics, a little dashboard. And I'm not going to bore you by going over all the items, but I do want to point out a couple of sets of numbers in here because I think they're important. The first one would be about in the middle of the page where it says that Farmington in 2024 had a 51.3% recycling rate. I hope everybody in this room appreciates the rarefied air that is, actually. I doubt that there's a city in Michigan that has a better recycling rate. There's probably very few in the Midwest that would have a better recycling rate. That really puts you in amongst the best communities in the country as far as your recycling rate goes. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the things that might improve upon that in the future. But that's an important number. It's more than twice what the state's average is. It's higher than every other Michigan community that I'm aware of. It exceeds the state's goals for recycling that are built into state law. So it's something to be proud of. And what that tells me, consistently you have a participatory population that understands the importance of materials management, putting these things back into the circular economy as opposed to into landfills. The other set of numbers I would point out to you would be in the bottom left-hand corner, and that's, what did you guys spend to do so well? And if you look in the city's municipal budget, I think in your line item is rubbish and recycling is the number. If you break that down on a per capita basis, you're 43% below the average for this region. And if you want to do it on a per household basis, it's 14 or 15% below the regional average. And the way I know that is because I do spend time going into the municipal budgets every year of 40 different communities, including the 9 RASAC communities, and pull those numbers out and then equalize them on a per capita and a per household basis. So I look at what are communities spending for their all things trash and recycling. And when I do that for this community, you're below average in your expenditures. Meanwhile, you're head and shoulders above everybody else in terms of your program performance. So that says a lot. I think it says really, honestly, 3 things. One is, other than what I already said about the people who live here, they get it, but it also says that you have a well-managed community. And I think you've capitalized on the benefits of intergovernmental cooperation and public-private partnerships and good vendor selection and service to the people that live here. So, everybody deserves a pat on the back for that. So those are the numbers for 2024, and I'm not going to belabor the rest of the numbers in here because they're just numbers. But I do want to talk about 3 projects that we're engaged in 2024 that have implications for 2025 and beyond. The first one is a disaster debris management plan. We've been working with Chuck and his team, and not just the other 8 RASAC communities, but also the 12 SACRA communities. If you're familiar with SACRA, they're a municipal authority, not unlike RASAC, that is Oak Park all the way up to Troy. And a few years back, after watching, what happened in 2014 with the floods in the Detroit metropolitan area and watching what happened with the wind shear event that went through this community in Farmington Hills not too long ago, and looking at what's continually happening elsewhere in the country with natural disasters, Jeff McKean, the now retired general manager of soccer, and I realized that we had a number of communities that just really weren't as prepared as they could be for dealing with these types of disasters in terms of the debris that gets generated. Most communities in Michigan and across the country do a really good job of emergency response when the red and blue lights are on. But not all communities do as good a job as they can when it's time for the guys with the yellow lights to go out there and really make sure that stuff gets cleaned up. Chuck's credit and the city's credit, the Farmington has done a pretty doggone good job in those types of situations, but not all communities can say that. And so what we realize is that we need to help these communities collectively and individually be better prepared in the event that some disaster strikes. My favorite story, and I will not name the community, but I did ask one of the municipal managers, what are you going to do if a tornado hits your community? And they say, well, we have a fund balance and we'll pay our trash hauler to pick all that stuff up. I'm like, okay, so what if that same tornado takes out their truck yard? Now what are you going to do? He didn't have an answer. Emergency manager in Oakland County once told me a story about when this wind shear event went through, was it 2021, I think? Mm-hmm. One of the townships that got hit, their plan was to call a Davie Tree Service. It was a DTE contract. They were kind of busy. So it's important to plan for these events. And so what we did is we hired Tetra Tech to work with each individual community, and we put a plan together for all 21 communities that's both collective and individual. Each community has their own appendices. And we completed phase 1 of that project this past year. Phase 2 is continuing to work with the communities to make sure everybody identifies the staging areas that they have available to handle this material if it can't get direct hauled to its final disposal facility. Make sure they understand or have in place pre-position contracts for debris monitoring, which are important if it's a FEMA level disaster and you're going to be seeking reimbursement. You're going to have to comply with FEMA rules and regulations. So you have to have those monitors. And then have those pre-position contracts for debris haulers to assist the resources you already have at hand, whether it's your in-house team or your contractors that you already work with, to bring more resources to bear so that when guys like Chuck have to come in at 4 o'clock in the morning when a tornado went through, he's got the resources ready. And he's got a playbook. And again, Farmington has been one of those communities that has had instances and has responded well. Not all communities have done so. And so this was an effort to raise the bar for everybody. In some cases, the bar didn't have to be raised all that high, but there are some communities the bar had to be raised quite a bit. And so we're working through that process, and we hope within the next quarter or two, we've got those RFPs are released, we've got the contractors, and then the communities can review potential contracts with additional service providers beyond what you already have. So that was a real important project that I was pretty passionate about, and happy to see it's making progress. So if there are any questions about that particular project, I'd be happy to answer them, but I got 2 other things I want to talk to you about.
Go for it.
Okay.
We'll do it.
So the other thing, and I think some of you already know about this, but this past 2024, we installed some AI scanners and some robots at the materials recovery facility at the MRF. We're really proud of those. One, because they're grant funded, so we paid 15 cents on the dollar to get these things into place. But they're really important for a variety of reasons. One is it certainly improves the efficiency of our operation. It uses AI technology to look at what's on the belt and gives us data about what's coming in, certain sections of the system and what's getting to other sections of the system, and then in between using robots to grab this material and capture it. And so it's giving us a lot of interesting information. It's giving us additional capacity, but we're using that, and I should mention this, we're using those robots not to replace workers, but we're using the robots for really 2 things. We're using them to complement our existing workforce. And 2, we're using robots to do things for which we can't get people. And that's a really big issue, and it'll only get bigger as time goes on. You know, there are 76 million baby boomers and 55 million Gen Xers. We're 21 million people short as the baby boomers, and I am one of them. As we continue to retire, there's going to continue to be a labor shortage. And so technology is one of the ways that we can overcome that. Can't overcome labor shortages in a lot of areas with technology, but recycling is one of them. And so we're really excited about that and happy to improve the efficiency and the use of emerging technologies at the MRF, and then do what I like to say is use other people's money to do it too. So getting some state grant funding, some stakeholder organizations of a nationwide basis has really been important for this project. And then, so the last project I want to talk to you about is really sort of a multi-phase project. We've been working in April. We started in the city of Wixom with a pilot project to allow residents to put food waste in with their yard waste. And so we can capture those organics. And it goes to the compost facility that's in Wixom, operated as a public-private partnership on DPW property. That went really well this year. We're going to continue that next year and keep monitoring that, watch participation, watch for things like odors and other types of vectors that potentially could occur. So far, so good. What we generally concluded, if a neighborhood doesn't have a raccoon or rat problem, putting the food waste in a different container at the curb is not going to create one. That's an important part of the whole equation. Two other important components in the food waste space. We just last Monday night presented to Southfield City Council a big project that was a multi-stakeholder project, again grant funded, fostered by a company called, a nonprofit called Make Food Not Waste. And it looks at reducing food waste across all sectors, across all platforms. And we're not just talking about food waste that we want to throw away, but reducing the amount of food that we waste in the first place. And then when we have food that we're not going to eat, whether we're at a restaurant or a cafeteria at some place like Lawrence Tech or in our homes, that we find pathways to get that food that's still edible to people that might need it more than we do. And so that's part of that project. And then lastly, when there is food, there is no more use for it, and it is waste, to make sure we can get it, instead of in the landfills, into the composting pathway. And the reason that's important is because it's good for soil, it's good for stormwater runoff, it's good for agricultural productivity, it reduces methane emissions at the landfill. There's a whole suite of economic and environmental benefits from composting as opposed to throwing food away. That project that was done in Southfield will eventually manifest itself into components of their sustainability plan, and then they will be actionable items that the city can avail themselves of at some point in the future. That project is also being replicated, again, grant funded, with 5 communities involved this time: Farmington Hills, Livonia, Canton Township, Westland, and Dearborn. So some big communities are looking at how can we do a better job of materials management when it comes to organics. Now, having said all that, what I'm also counseling communities to do is to plan and to be patient. Now, there's a lot of pilot projects out there. There's a lot of, new Royal Oak Farmers Markets. They're collecting food waste, and Canton Township's got a drop-off, and Ferndale's got a drop-off, and there's some of that stuff's going on, and that's great, and that helps build the ethos around better materials management when it comes to organics. But if we really want to move the dial, if we really want to make meaningful impact, we've got to look at what's happening in our homes, how do we reduce the amount of food that we waste, and when we do have food that we're not going to eat, make sure we have a composting pathway for it. But all that takes a lot of planning. And it takes what I've been using, the analogy I've been using is, I don't know if anybody here does puzzles, but my wife and I do puzzles. You lay it out on the table, and you got to get the 4 corners first. Start work on your edge. So there's 4 corners of this puzzle, and it's a complicated puzzle when it comes to food waste and composting. So the four corners are you do need a participatory and compliant population. People have to want to do it, and they have to want to do it right. Now, this community already has a precedent for that in recycling, so you got sort of one corner probably solved when the time is right. Another corner is you've got to have local decision makers like yourselves be willing to program and pay for it. It's not cheap. It's not free, for sure. In Southfield, for example, when we asked their contracted hauler if they were willing to change the specification in the contract, change the definition of yard waste to include food waste, what would it take? And they're like, well, we're going to need different trucks. We're going to want it in carts. We're going to want to collect it 52 weeks a year. It's going to be $24 per household per year, and that's if you buy the carts, which are $50, $60 a piece. So you can do the math. It's not cheap. But that's one piece of the puzzle. If you want to move the recycling bar forward past 51%, that's really where, no pun intended, that's where the low-hanging fruit is to go after organics. But there's two more really important pieces of this puzzle. One is you've got to have the destination facilities ready to take it at scale. There aren't really that many facilities in Southeast Michigan that can take organics that include food waste. You've got the one that's probably the most likely candidate, and the one that most folks are using is Spurt in Wixom, and they can handle food waste along with yard waste. But if every community in Southeast Michigan were to start collecting it, they're going to get overrun. There's only a handful of other sites in Southeast Michigan that can manage it. And it's got to be a matter of, are they ready to manage it? Are they ready to manage it using best practices? Are they ready to manage it in a way that mitigates or ensures that there are no negative consequences, i.e. odors, for example, into the surrounding neighborhoods? And so that's a really critical piece of the puzzle that has to be in place before you worry about, does the community want it, and can they pay for it, or are they willing to pay for it? Then lastly, the regulatory framework around all that. Part 115 was updated a couple years ago. The general permits that compost facilities have to get, just at the end of January, the public comment period on that newly promulgated permit document just ended. And so the compost permit isn't even ready for prime time yet. And already Eagle is proposing some additional changes to Part 115 because they're finding some housekeeping things they need to take care of. And the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development is considering some additional fees that they're trying to pull a decades-old law off the shelf to impose some fees on compost facilities. And that has to be all sorted out. And so the regulatory framework around food waste is anything but settled. The destination facilities aren't quite ready to handle it from everybody at scale. And then we've got the other corners that we have to, consider at the local level very, very thoughtfully. And so these projects like Wixom and Southfield and this 5-community project will yield more answers that you could probably expect me to come back before you at some point in the future and talk about some of these things because it does, I think, represent an opportunity to continue to improve upon your program performance. But it's got to be done in a thoughtful, well-reasoned, planned out way, and I'm urging patience. So that's my story. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions from the council? Mike, I'm always fascinated when you come to our meetings. You bring us so much good news about what's going on in Farmington, but also all of these projects and things that are going on. I did have one question for you.
Oh, yeah.
How circular is the compost stream today? Like, does stuff that we put in our yard waste end up as compost on a Michigan farm? Or does it just kind of go to a compost pile that then is sold to the general public? Or how circular is that?
It's pretty circular, particularly if it goes to one of the, and I'll be honest, I haven't checked Waste Management, maybe Chuck knows if they're still taking it to Spurt. If they're taking it to Spurt, which they used to, and I believe they still are, very, very circular. they actually sell that stuff to landscapers and to farms, and it's definitely a very well-produced product. Bill Whitley, the guy that owns and manages Spurt, he's probably the highest credentialed guy in the compost space in the state. And they take a lot of pride in the product that they create. So it's very circular. Now, that's not to say that there aren't compost sites in Michigan, particularly even in southeast Michigan, that the stuff just kind of sits there. And it's just, yeah, it's not going to landfill, but is it really being made into something? I can't say that it is. But there are some really good players. Country Oaks up in Genesee County, Tut Hill Farms in Livingston County, Spurt, just up the road, up 96. They do a very good job with the yard waste, and in some of those cases, they're doing real cool things with food waste. And we're even seeing, not to go on too long, but place up in Burton, the Country Oaks. They have static piles. They're running glycol loops underneath their piles to generate heat, which heats the floor of their pole barn. And then they also have hydroponics on site too. So they're doing all kinds of cool things. So it's a space that's emerging and becoming more and more important. We're seeing a couple of worm composters in the state, actually, where they're at an industrial level. They're taking food and composting it with worms and using that to capture the nutrient content. So there's a lot of cool things going on, but for us to scale this up so that municipal programming can take advantage of the technologies and the opportunities, it's gonna take that planning.
And the pilot projects, have you seen higher adoption, same adoption, or lower than, say, some of the household devices that are available now to do household composting that don't require you to put it outside? I'm thinking of these little trash can size units that have a heat source and you can compost in the house now. Like, have you seen these community-wide programs be more successful than, telling everybody, hey, there's a device out here if you want to compost?
Yeah, there is some uptake of those in-home devices, but the problem is, one is they take up counter space, two, they use a lot of energy, and three, depending on which unit you're buying, it's not really composting. All it's really doing is drying it out. And so there's a debate in the space about, is it composting, is it not composting? I can tell you, when we did some survey work in Wixom, we also extended that survey work to the other 8 Rossock communities. And we found that in Wixom, there was good uptake in participating in the curbside pilot. And then across all of the Rossock communities, 86% of the people said that they would participate in a curbside composting program that took food waste. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily how valid that is, because I kind of liken it to the recycling participation. Some communities are really good and some aren't. And people say they'll do it until they get dealing with the ick factor of having to keep food around and not putting it in the plastic bag and putting it in their trash. So we'll see. But we do know that they are popular. We also know that we're seeing increasing use of private sector service providers like My Green Michigan. They do a lot of events, and we're going to do some, through the Southfield project, we're going to do some piloting at apartment complexes as well to see if we can get apartment dwellers to actually, not throw their food waste in the trash, and see if they'll compost it. Stay tuned on that. We'll see.
Thank you. If there's no, Ms. Taylor.
Yeah, I have a question for you. I think Farmington, just my guess, would be if we had the option to do curbside composting, I feel like the people who come to us and say, well, how come the recycling bins are smaller than the trash cans? That's wrong. I think it tells you a bit. When do you think we'd have more results from the pilot projects that we're doing right now, that you're doing right now? When would it be coming back to us? We're talking a year, 2 years?
Yeah, I would say maybe this time next year we would have more data and be better positioned to have a more serious conversation, because we'll have another year with the Wixom pilot under our belt. We will have, hopefully by then, some data from the pilot with the My Green Michigan or whoever they end up using in the Southfield, and then we should be done with the 5 community project. And I'm really hopeful that the regulatory framework is all settled and done by then as well, so we kind of know what the landscape is to allow companies like Spurt, like Country Oaks, like Tut Hill, whomever else wants to get in the game, to make the necessary investments in the equipment. These things aren't cheap. It's one of the common refrains we hear when I was talking to Southfield Council last week before. It's different than your backyard composting. Backyard composting, you're talking about your fruits and vegetables. At the industrial level, you can include meats and fats and oils and all those things. And they use the phrase, if it grows, it goes. And so that's possible because of capital investment, of equipment. It's not, putting it in something in your backyard and allowing nature to take its course. It involves working with nature with capital investment. And those capital investments are only possible if the regulatory framework is settled, and then they know that there's going to be a market for it because communities are then continue to show interest in trying to do better materials management.
Another question while I have you here. Could you talk a little bit about the state of recycling or requiring recycling or encouraging landlords to provide it at apartments? Currently, that's not required in Farmington, and it's not offered at many apartments. You just have to throw everything in the trash or stick your recycling in a bag in the closet and take it to your parents' home or something like that.
Yeah, so that is an uphill battle for a number of reasons. I will say that one of the changes to Part 115 is that there's now a definition of what constitutes a benchmark recycling program. It includes making sure that there are drop-offs available for those residents that don't have on-site recycling at their home. And so the drop-off center that we have in Southfield and the one we have up the road in Novi are important to providing that service for those residents and for complying with state law. But it is also an uphill battle to get apartment managers to want to recycle. And really, we've tried to use the carrot approach historically, where I'll be quite honest, it's been pretty unsuccessful. We've had a situation right here in Farmington where this goes back a number of years, probably before any of you were on the council, where we actually talked to one of the apartment managers and said, hey, we'll pay for everything. We'll have Waste Management donate the containers, they'll do the pickup, they'll integrate it into the curbside program, Rossock will pay for all the education, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to mess with it. Same thing happened to us in Southfield. We actually had the mayor and the apartment owner, some equity firm out of D.C., said, yeah, we want to do recycling. They had met at an event. And so we put this whole turnkey pilot project together for 6 months. It wasn't going to cost them anything. GFL was going to provide the containers. We were going to provide everything else, the education. Wasn't going to cost them. And the local management firm said, yeah, we don't want to mess with it. All that is to say that if a community really wants apartments to have on-site recycling, it probably does take an ordinance. But that's problematic because most of the apartments that we have throughout the country, but certainly in Southeast Michigan, were built without recycling in mind. There's no space to put the recycling containers. You've got the required dumpster corral with the fence around it. Every other square foot is taken up by either leasable floor space or required parking spaces or required green belt or required sidewalks or required stormwater detention. And they literally have no place to put new infrastructure to do recycling, which is why, most municipalities are really reluctant to do that. One of the things we are seeing on a going forward basis, and the city of Southfield is a good example of that, when we started talking with their planning department, who's in charge of their sustainability plan, about the importance of materials management, integrating that as one of the 10 components of their overall sustainability plan, we started talking to them about this very issue. And they will be proposing to integrate into their zoning ordinance and their site plan review requirements for future development to ensure that those new developments do plan to have the infrastructure available to do the recycling. But to impose that on as-built facilities is pretty challenging.
Gotcha. I appreciate that, David.
Mike, thank you again for coming.
Pleasure.
We always appreciate you coming out and telling us how great we're doing. That always makes us feel good.
Makes me feel good, too.
I mean, and especially on camera, like, we couldn't ask for a better, rah-rah Farmington.
You got it.
But thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and it's always fascinating when you join us, so thank you for spending your time with us.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda, new business, item 7A, purchase of a replacement van for water and sewer. Mr. Udi.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Yes, this is a request to replace the 2014 Water and Sewer Department crew chief's van. The crew chief's van typically responds to all water emergencies, sewer emergencies, this van's equipped for all the mist digs, water meter reading. This van's on the road more than any of the other vehicles, and it was actually scheduled to be replaced in 2022, but due to other replacements, we held on for a few additional years. We've contacted both the GM and the Chevrolet dealership. They were not willing to commit to being able to get us a red-colored van. They said they can only promise to fulfill the order if it's white or black. The Ford dealer had a very competitive quote, but usefulness, the Dodge ProMaster fits our needs a little bit better, so.
You can have any color you want, as long as it's white or black. I think I've heard that slogan before.
I think it was only black.
Nice. Questions for Mr. Udi? If not, is there a motion?
Move to authorize the purchase of a 2025 Ram 2500 ProMaster CVHR 136WB from LaFontaine CDJR Lansing in the amount of $49,699.
Support.
Motion by Ms. Taylor, supported by Mrs. Balk. Clerk Bachman, will you please call the roll?
Bulk.
Yes.
LaRussa.
Yes.
Parkins.
Yes.
Schneeman.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 7B, salt storage structure deposit. Back to you, Mr. Udi.
Yes, part of the contract that City Council approved back in January was for the reconstruction of the salt structure. Public Works creating a fabric-type structure on 11-foot tall concrete walls. To get this project going, we need to make our deposit payment as it was outlined in the contract. I believe it's a 35% deposit on it. With that there, they are currently trying to get us on the schedule. Well, we are on the schedule for reconstruction. I've been in communication with Clear Heights Construction, advising them the earliest they could probably start construction is mid-April. And with it being completed, I believe, by September 1st or substantial construction by September 1st and final walkthrough October 1st. So they're ready to get going as soon as they have their deposit in hand.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Mr. Schneeman.
Can I have a ribbon cutting?
We'll get the scissors for you so you can come out and attend it.
I think we should do something with salt.
Other questions for Mr. Udi? If not,
Move to approve the deposit to Clear Heights Construction LLC in the amount of $187,315.45 for the reconstruction of the salt storage structure located at 33720, West 9 Mile Road.
Support.
motion by Mrs. Balk, supported by Mr. Parkins this time. Clerk Bachman, will you please call the roll?
LaRussa.
Yes.
Parkins.
Yes.
Schneeman.
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Bulk.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 8, other business. Mr. Weber, welcome to the dais, standing in for the absent Mr. Murphy. Appreciate you being here tonight and shepherding us through this meeting. Is there any other business this evening?
I have nothing for council tonight.
Okay. That brings us to public comment. This is the second part of the meeting where members of the public who wish to address the city council may do so. However, seeing no one in the house, I'll take some privilege and move along to item 10, city council comments. Any members of the city council wish to make comment this evening? Again, thanks, Mr. Weber, for joining us this evening. If there's nothing further, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Balk, supported by Ms. Taylor. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned at 8:16 PM.